Edification and Excellence, the Visionary Philosophy of W.E.B. Du Bois. Today we will look at the work and life of W.E.B. Du Bois and his impact on education and life today. We'll take a look at the historical perspective, his philosophical perspective, as well as his significance and impact. We'll look at opposing views, the educational implications, and a brief personal analysis. Du Bois was born during the time known as Reconstruction era in 1868. During this time, key civil rights legislation was passed, including the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, which abolished slavery, declared blacks as citizens, and gave them the right to vote. Also during this time, there was an increased African American participation in government, targeted initiatives to educate and increase literacy amongst emancipated people, and African Americans gained the ability to purchase land. All of these progressive actions were met by fierce resistance from Southern whites. Du Bois grew up in a relatively integrated community in Massachusetts, so he was not accustomed to the racial practices of the South. But he came of age during a time of intense racial violence, segregation, and the rise of scientific racism. His first experiences with these things came during his time at Fisk University. Du Bois was the first African American to earn a PhD from Harvard University. He also co-founded the NAACP, which is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and he advocated for racial equality through scholarly research and activism. Du Bois' philosophical perspective focused on scholarly rigor, activist leadership, and a global perspective. He believed in increasing awareness of the oppressed and the oppressor. He saw education as an instrument for reform and as a means to focus on addressing societal problems. His ideas about education shifted from an elitism perspective through the talented 10th to a more broader perspective, advocating for university education for all. Some important ideas from Du Bois' work include double consciousness, which looks at the duality of being African American and adhering to one's culture and being fully American, this idea of a two-ness of consciousness. He was a big believer in social justice and advocated for immediate political and civil rights through education, protest, and intellectual discourse. He also rejected scientific racism, which basically stated that one race was superior to another based on their ethnic background, in which whites used this scientific racism as a means to oppress blacks. He was also a huge proponent of progressivism. He believed in practical solutions while maintaining radical goals for complete equality. And last but not least, Du Bois was a proponent for Pan-Africanism, which was a global move to unite blacks across the world in racial solidarity and anti-colonialism. He has had several significant impacts on life today, including a pioneer of African American studies. He co-founded the NAACP, which still fights against racial segregation and advocating for voter rights and education today. His intellectual legacy through ideas of double consciousness and the talented 10th remain influential in societal and racial studies today. His global ideas of Pan-Africanism inspired anti-colonial movements and connected blacks all across the world. And through his Souls of Black Folks, he revolutionized African American literature and focused on the ideas of enfranchisement, political power, and education. But not everyone agreed with Du Bois. One of his biggest opponents was Booker T. Washington. Washington believed in a more accommodative approach and believed African Americans should accept discrimination and compromise. Du Bois also believed in vocational training and skilled trades over liberal arts education, believing that social change will come gradually. He was a proponent of industrial education. There are several implications for Du Bois' educational footing, some of which include the promotion of educational equity and access, a universal education for all, curriculum reform, as well as critical thinking processes and social purpose. Personally, I believe that there is a form of education for all. It does not have to be university education, but everyone should do their best to be their best self. I believe in social justice and equality and must be mindful and strategic in dismantling current systematic oppression and biases. And African Americans need to develop a system to self sustain and support causes that increase Black financial stability.